everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the program director and festival director for Something Wicked Film Festival and Events, and welcome to our show. We are actually, I don't think we've done many films based or from director Lucio Fulci, so it's a really good pleasure for us to revisit another film from this amazing director with one of my favorite co-hosts who we actually did do the previous Lucio Fulci movie, The Beyond, with. So with me today is Thomas Tenorello, and we are talking about Lucio Fulci's City of the Living Dead. Now, this is a cult movie, and I know there are some people out there who really love this. There are some people out there who really loathe this movie, and then there are some people who probably have never seen it because it just looks like a crazy ass gory gore fest of a film. So it's going to be great for our conversation today, and we're going to delve deep into this movie, or as deep as we possibly can, I guess. So Thomas, tell us all a little bit about, your impressions on having seen Lucio Fulci's City of the Living Dead.
Well, Kevin, we're going to spill our guts on this movie. There are a lot of guts to be had in this movie. Yeah, you mentioned we did Beyond, but we also did Zombie.
Oh, that's right, we did.
His most commercially successful horror movie, probably, and probably the movie that if they didn't already, they probably would retroactively put that on Fulci's grave. A little picture of the zombie head saying, "We'll eat you. We will eat you. We're going to eat you." Right next to Lucio Fulci's birth and death date. So I consider actually Zombie, The Beyond, and City of the Living Dead to be the zombie trilogy from him. Mm-hmm. Granted, City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, and House by the Cemetery are considered part of what's called the Gates of Hell trilogy.
Yeah.
But pretty much everyone agrees that City of the Living Dead is the least good of the three. So because of that, I have avoided City of the Living Dead. So I personally prefer to kind of supplant, watch them in this order: Zombie, or Zombie 2, or Zombie Flesh Eaters, if you're in the UK listening to this.
Yep.
Good morning, my UK listeners. Our UK listeners, good or top of the morning to you, whatever you guys say over there. And follow it with The Beyond, or follow it with City of the Living Dead. Actually, no, follow it with City of the Living Dead, because that movie will get you hyped for The Beyond. Because you shouldn't have diminishing returns. Of course, this is speaking from, because this coming from somebody who watched the Evil Dead trilogy backwards. I watched Army of Darkness, Evil Dead 2, and the Evil Dead, and I had diminishing returns with that one. So,
which is funny because I know so many people who have watched those backwards. But with me, Zombie was my intro film to Lucio Fulci, and then I didn't watch the Beyond in its uncut real version for a while. I think I mentioned before I watched it under, what was the other title? That it went under a shitty title that had a crappy version of it out there.
The Seven Doors of Death.
Yes, Seven Doors of Death. So that's how I originally saw that movie. And obviously, that's a cut up, really screwed up version of it. And that's what I grew up with. And I ended up liking this movie, City of the Living Dead, more for a long time. And then, of course, I actually really enjoy House by the Cemetery as well. But when I rewatched this movie, I guess my fondness for it growing up is much different than my interpretation now, because we've already rewatched Zombie, which I think is a classic, and The Beyond, which I also think is a classic. And then I watched this one, and this one for me didn't really hold up nearly as well, although I do still like some of the gore effects in it. So, what do you think?
Had to finish the trilogy. I feel like it behooves us to finish it, so it's why we had to talk about this movie tonight.
Yeah,
we had to finish it. We owe it to Fulci to do it. So this one's for you, Lucio.
Well, I hope to get around to reviewing and screening all of his movies. Hopefully.
That's a lot to do. Now, Kevin, I'll tell you, I saw this movie probably right before. I'm pretty sure I saw it in like a double or triple feature on Tubi during the pandemic. I
Oh,
think that
okay.
I
More
think that
recent.
yeah, I think this is another one of those that I saw huddled together in my sister-in-law's house, sleeping on the couch because there wasn't enough beds in her house for us while we were selling our house during the pandemic. And I probably watched this movie for the first time, like I watched The Beyond on my little phone at
Uh,
night. And also like so that's probably what but I'd heard of it by reputation
mhm.
because of obviously because of its trilogy nature being synonymous with The Beyond and House by the Cemetery, but also because like I'd seen a review of it on Trailers from Hell,
Oh,
which
okay.
yeah, because Ernest Dickerson, the guy who directed
Demon
uh,
Knight.
Demon Knight,
Boom.
apparently this is one of his favorite movies, and he did Trailers from Hell on it, and he described it as being very nightmarish and not having any sense about it, and so because of that, it had the nightmare structure.
Yes.
Uh, he thought it was very very enjoyable that way, and I agree. I think as nightmarish and strange as The Beyond is, it's much more cohesive than this movie.
I'll agree with you on that one. When I rewatched it, that my fondness for it was probably because it was so above me, and I kept thinking I just didn't get it, but it was so cool with all the gore effects and everything like that. But watching it as a film connoisseur and a film critic now, um, and knowing, having watched like every Lucio Fulci movie now, that this, part of his flair is not having cohesive movies to begin stories to begin with.
No,
So
no, and I think when I saw The Beyond and I saw City of the Living Dead and Zombie, I started like, and this was part of, I don't remember which came first, me seeing those movies or me writing a zombie script that I finished for a feature film that I did fairly recently. Um, I don't know which came first. Well, you know what? It must have Fulci. Getting into Fulci must have been come first because like his DNA just runs through everything that I did in that script. But I trying to kind of, but I did some research on him for the when we did our show on The Beyond, and found out about his writing process,
mm-hmm.
and it blew me away because I loved the idea that he didn't really outline in a traditional sense of the word. He just kind of had a basic idea that he liked, and then he would just write a list of scenes, just for almost like freehand, of the kinds of scenes that he'd want to see in a movie like this. And sometimes they got in the movie, and sometimes they did not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is probably the one movie that you could point to and see that structure
Yeah.
writ large, because it's almost like an album. It's almost like a concept album. It's like music. Like each scene is a song, and some follow one after the other. Some don't. Most don't actually. And some some songs are more memorable and memey and get in your stuck in your head more than others. Um, Although in this particular, we'll get to it when we talk about the ending. This particular album, I think, has a big scratch at the end, and it's not quite finished, unfortunately. So that's kind of the way that I see this. In some ways, it's more of a. Some people I think will watch this and think, "Oh, this is just dress rehearsal for the Beyond." And yes, it is kind of that. It's a transitional film. This was his follow up to Zombie. He goes from Zombie, City of the Living Dead, and then The Beyond, and then House by the Cemetery. And I think he follows it up with New York Ripper. So this is part of a string of hits that Fulci had from like 79 to 83 that is unparalleled amongst other Italian filmmakers. I think even Argento wasn't doing as good at this time. So he was in the top of his game at this. And so I guess City of the Living Dead deserves to be remembered for seeing Fulci at his most experimental in the horror genre. Like this movie crawled so that the Beyond could fly.
So you bring up something I want to mention because you're absolutely right. He tried out a lot of different things that other people weren't doing, and I noticed that in this movie with the way that zombies are. And at rewatching his movies, his zombie movies, and the fact that they're real yet never seem real because they can just pop in and out of scenes and places at will. And they're not going after people's brains or anything like that. Some of them kill people. Some of them make people kill themselves. Some of them make people throw up their own intestines. It's never consistent, and that's what makes it such a nightmarish film. And
Yeah.
when we rewatched this film, it all started to click with me because we've been talking about the Beyond and how much that does some of the same things with the zombies that are featured in this one. You know.
Oh yeah, because like, ladies and gentlemen out there, most people only know of two kinds of zombies. There are well, three if you're well versed in the genre. There are the fast zombies that you get from the 2000s. Your Dawn of the Dead remakes, your City of the your Dawn of the Dead remakes, your 28 Days Later, the blah, blah, those things. Then you have on the other side of the spectrum, you have the slow, classic Romero shambling zombies, which you do see in Fulci's Zombie. Although he breaks some of the rules in that regard too, because you actually see zombies rising from their grave in
Mhm.
zombie. You do not see that in a classic Romero plague zombie scenario. The third kind, of course, if you're a real connoisseur, you refer to like the medium fast zombie, the smart zombie, the funny zombie. This is, of course, the zombie popularized by Return of the Living Dead in the mid '80s. But this movie.
Fulci created his own zombies to transcend everything else, and there is no logic to them.
we have we have I guess floating zombies, teleporting zombies, zombies that pass through walls, question mark, zombies with telekinetic powers,
Yeah.
zombies who apparently can, like you said, make people literally throw their guts up. although i would argue Although I would argue that what they're really doing is they're embalming people alive, because and they also have super strength,
Mhm.
because we see them like grabs the back of someone's head and just like crush the back of their heads, and their brains just kind of ooze out of them. You got to be strong to do that. And I used to think that was a terrible effect because the brains look so like jello, like
Uh-huh.
egg yolks coming out of it. But then I did some research, and it turns out the only reason why brains look the way they do in popular movies or in like science labs and stuff is because they put some kind of bonding chemical to make them more hard and squishy.
Oh,
So really, your brain, if you were just like cut your head open, your brain would just spill out like a bowl of jello.
okay.
So actually, that's more what we see in this movie is actually kind of accurate to what a brain coming out of your head would look like. Um, so yeah, there's no rules with these zombies, and sometimes though and it's also like, of course, we're all familiar with each. Oh, I forgot to mention, like there is of course that fourth type of zombie, the leech zombies from say Night of the Creeps, where it's alien parasites.
Mm.
But with each of these things, there's always like one way to kill them: shoot them in the head, they're dead. Burn the leeches, the creeps. That's how you kill them. Trioxin zombies from Return of the Living Dead. You're screwed. Just run. There's no way to kill those. You're just gonna die. You're gonna get your brain eaten. No, there's nothing to do. Or complete and total dismemberment, like in the the Evil Dead
Yeah.
franchise. This freaking movie, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but I think some zombie fans will be shocked. Spoilers.
If
To
they've never seen the movie, they'll definitely be shocked.
Oh yeah, we'll be shocked by how freaking easy it is to kill these zombies who otherwise should be freaking terrifying. Because, like I said, they can teleport, they can levitate, they can fly pretty much. They can pet. There's no way you could board yourself up as Fort Knox in your house. It will not stop these Fulci nightmare zombies from coming in
Yeah.
and killing you. And they do eat people. They got that going for them. That's the only thing that they do have in common with other zombies, is that they do eat people after they've like squished your brain, I guess. But yes, that we do see one scene where they eat people, I guess because they were bored, because they don't need to eat people, and there's no inclination throughout any of the weird theological and mythological investigations that the characters do into this that have any indication that this is part of what they do. But yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It's not supposed to make any sense. Um, But yeah, it's so easy to kill them if you just stick them with a pointy object, seemingly anywhere on their bodies, and they just die again. I'm like, okay, nobody thinks to shoot them. Actually, yeah, nobody shoots them in this. I think about it.
Yeah.
Probably would work. There are no guns in this movie.
There's no guns. Yeah, there's not. Well, there probably is with the cop in the first act, but yeah, after that, I don't think so. Which begs us to actually go a little bit into the plot of the movie. For those who have not been inundated with Fulci's City of the Living Dead, it's pretty freaking basic. In Dunwich, the town of Dunwich, which I love that they use that, but it's in the movie it's lowercase letters, which seems really weird to me every time I see it.
Right,
yeah.
No, didn't notice, guys. Lovecraft reference.
Yes. A father, I can't remember his name, I don't have it on it, but a priest kills himself on opening a gateway to hell as one of the 7 gates of hell. And at the exact same time, or somewhere around there, during a seance, Mary has a premonition of seeing all of the priest committing suicide, and then zombies rising and everything going to shit and going to hell. She is so shocked by her nightmare seance that she seemingly dies. So this is one of my favorite parts, because this is why I decided to explain a little bit, and then I'll let you jump in. But she seemingly dies, and they bury her, and then a reporter comes by to want to know a little bit more about what happened to Mary. And as they are, in the cemetery, as they're burying Mary into the ground, who they think is dead, the reporter, who I can't remember his name, but he's a reporter, accidentally hears Mary when she wakes up in her coffin, not even buried yet, but she's in the ground in her coffin. She's shocked and shit, and she's screaming, and the reporter comes by he just happens to grab the pickaxe from the grave diggers and splinters the coffin with it, almost killing her 3 times. That's one of my favorite scenes in this movie. I think is fucking amazing, because he's trying to save her, yet he almost kills her every time he does this. And you see this from inside the coffin, and it's really an amazing shot when you see that freaking pickaxe come straight into the coffin and almost hitting her in the face. And then, of course, that allows these 2 characters to realize that she had a nightmare about one of the 7 gates of hell opening, and that they're now tasked with the duty of finding the town of Dunwich and closing the gates of hell by finding the priest who died, or finding the body of the priest. Yeah. but of course, as they're doing this in the town of Dunwich, people are fucking dying left and right, because the dead priest, or the spirit of the dead priest, or the phantom of the dead priest, just shows up in random spots, killing random people just because he can do whatever he wants to, now that he doesn't have to rely on a real body, because it should have been buried and everything else. And that leads to all kinds of craziness, because every person that the priest kills returns as a zombie. I don't think I ever realized that as a kid until I rewatched it. I was like, oh shit, that's that person who was I don't think I just, because I watched so many zombie films, I kind of just assumed they're just random people that died. But they're all the people that were killed in the movie return as zombies.
Yeah, he's building his army, I think.
Building his army. As a kid, like I said, as a kid, I saw this movie, I don't know how many times. It's been years since I've seen it, though. So when I rewatched it, critically, I was picking up on some of this shit that I didn't realize when I was a kid. Because when you're a kid watching this, you just think it's a cool zombie movie. It's gory, action-packed. There's someone dying like every 5 minutes in this film.
Pretty much. Like, the pace is pretty good on this. You won't have any... Ladies and gentlemen, you will not have any pacing issues watching this thing, but we cannot gloss over the subplot, the pervert subplot in this movie.
Yes,
because there is a whole subplot that kind of sort of goes nowhere, involving this pervert named Bob. Yeah, because I did not remember his name the first time I saw this movie, but then I saw it again. I was like, oh crap, his name is Bob. And
Mm-hmm.
this is Fulci letting you know that nothing positive can happen regarding this character. Because as fans, anybody who's been on the internet the past 10 years knows that Bob, the kid in House by the Cemetery, is the most annoying character in all of horror, apparently. So I guess Fulci must have had it out with some person named Bob in his life. Because everybody, every character named Bob or Joe, he hates those two people. They're always bad. They are always disgusting, bad, awful people, no matter what. But this Bob character, I'm guessing, just trying to piece it together from what the fragmentary narrative is. I'm guessing this Bob is supposed to be kind of sort of the Renfield to Father Thomas's. That's his name, Father Thomas,
Oh,
because
thank you.
Doubting Thomas, yeah. Fulci probably half paid attention in Sunday school. Um, the He's supposed to, I think, be the Renfield to his Dracula, because like he shows up. Okay, so like we see this Bob character who looks like a skinny child molester type character with weird eyes, and he's stumbling around the windy streets of Dunwich, which ever since this incident with Father Thomas hanging himself is always windy and just
Thank
gets
you for
windy.
mentioning that.
Yeah,
I
it
noticed
always.
that too. Every scene after he kills himself is windy. They mentioned the dust everywhere. It was like the theme look of Dunwich was this, like the wind has come in, the mist has come in, and it's taken over the entire town.
Oh yeah, it gives great atmosphere to everything,
Yeah.
especially the cemetery. Which, by the way, I didn't. Fun fact: that cemetery is a real cemetery in Savannah. I looked up the actual Savannah, Georgia. I looked up the name of it, but it was a real cemetery, a real historical cemetery, and apparently that first premonition scene that Katarina McCall sees, a zombie coming up from the very shallow grave, which is like a trademark Fulci. Um, Apparently, that grave that they put that zombie actor in had a real dead body in it, because because such an old cemetery, a lot of the bodies, headstones have been disinterred over the years. So yeah, that must have been
Okay.
a day on set. Like, oh crap, there's a real dead body in here, Lucio. Nah, keep it going. It looks so good. It's my bad Fulci impression. But anyway, Bob the pervert. We know he is a pervert just because he goes into this abandoned house, which I guess is where he hides out. And he sees Father Thomas glower at him, not killing him, but
Mm-hmm.
I guess following him and killing people around Bob so that people think Bob is a killer. And but the first thing that he sees in this house is well, aside from you know what, I know what this house is. This is his quote unquote girlfriend's house, because Bob has a blow up doll.
Yes. I thought you were gonna be.
Bob has a blow up doll that looks like, not like a good blow up doll. It literally looks like a pool, like, flotation device. Although I will say, like, it inflates like instantly. And he's about to have his way with this thing. Thank God we do not actually see him do that, because he is interrupted by a vision question mark of this horribly disgusting, rotting, what I think is an infant. I think it's a baby on the floor, and
I
it's
couldn't tell what it was either. I was like, I always assumed it was just a random body, but you're right. When I rewatched, I was like, what the hell is this actually?
I'm pretty sure it's a baby, and it's got maggots. There's a lot of maggots in this movie,
Right.
but tons of maggots. I don't think that Bob killed the baby because he seems terrified at it.
Mm-hmm.
Although maybe he did kill the baby, and this is Father Thomas like playing on Bob's guilt. Or maybe it's an aborted baby that he fathered. I don't know. The viewer are invited to fill in Bob's backstory, because that's all you get from Fulci. And it also seems like his whole thing just kind of plays out like a different movie, because like he goes from person to person looking for somebody to be nice to him, and he finds one girl who's nice to him.
Yeah.
And she like offers to give him shelter in her car, and her dad shows up, thinks he's trying to molest her. And one of the more memorable scenes of this movie, of just sheer violent horror, happens in this movie that has nothing to do with zombies, is her dad kills Bob in the most uncalled for way imaginable. He literally drills his brain with a giant drill, and Fulci just like drags it out as long as possible. That drill just almost getting in there, Bob looking at it, drill almost getting in there, Dad looking at it, drill, and then finally just goes through. And oh my gosh, yikes.
Yeah.
I almost felt sorry for him.
And since I was watching a Blu-ray version of it, it looked really good on my Blue Underground Blu-ray.
Oh yes, there's a 4K version of this movie out now too. So
yeah, I would expect so. Because I saw the 4K version of the Beyond and Zombie when they re-released it at the theater, because I had to go see those. I don't know if they re-released this movie at the theater when they did that, but I did go see those two.
I'm pretty sure they did, because I think online I was trying to do some research to find out, because on Tubi, I was trying to find out why on Tubi, the version I saw, it says City of the Living Dead Special Edition. And I'm like, what kind of George Lucasery was going on here? Apparently, it's Special Edition because this is the remastered 4K remastered version of it with the original title. Because this movie, like the other movies in this trilogy, and almost every Fulci movie at this time period, was originally released as, well, the Italian title loosely translates as Fear in the Town of the Living Dead, which is actually how you'll find the soundtrack album by Fabio Fabrizi. It's listed as Fear in the Town of the Living Dead soundtrack. We'll talk more about Fabio's amazing music as we go along, because it's one of the highlights of this movie. I mean, even if you end up not liking this film, ladies and gentlemen, please watch it just for Fabio's music, because divine. But yeah, you're right. This whole thing just kind of hinges on this evil priest, Father Thomas, who is evil for reasons unclear. We just know that he came upon this idea that he's going to open the gateway to hell for reasons by killing himself on hallowed ground, on this particular cemetery, on a particular day. Because what we didn't quite touch on is that this is a Halloween movie, because everything happens leading up to All Saints Day, or All Souls Day, which is Halloween, and then culminates on All Saints Day, which is November 1st. So this is a Halloween movie, although there's nobody in costume. There's no decorations anywhere, because I guess the town of Dunwich doesn't celebrate Halloween.
Yep.
But it's a Halloween movie, guys. So if you're looking for something new to turn on for your Halloween party, this might be it. But I want to get into a little bit how, like, we're talking about the town. So the town of Dunwich, we know that it's supposed to be this town with an evil past. Like, everyone in the town, because, by the way, this is, I mean, little side journey. This movie kind of does suffer from sort of the same kind of thing that movies like The Keep suffered from, which is there's no clear main character. We don't spend a whole lot of time with pretty much any one person in this movie. There are at least 3 protagonists. I feel like Fulci kind of learned some of his lessons with this script when he did The Beyond, because I feel like the 2 male leads in this, you already mentioned the intrepid reporter, whose name is Peter.
Thank you.
And he's played by the 70s sexy, manly man, Christopher George, who apparently was like also kind of like a male model sex symbol. He was in Playgirl magazine, I think, at one point. And then the other guy, the psychiatrist, whose name I cannot remember, that guy looks totally different. He looks kind of like a cross between like kind of like Donald Sutherland in The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, mixed with, I would imagine, like a 70s youth pastor folk singer type guy. That's kind of what this guy looks like.
You may
And
have confused everyone even more with that one.
yeah, um, but like so he's like the shrink. And I think he actually lives in Dunwich.
Yeah.
For George and Katerina McCall are in New York when all
Mhm.
this goes down, and they spend almost the entire movie getting lost after the buried alive sequence, um, which is so insane because the build up to it is so mundane and also so um, suspenseful, but also like anxiety inducing.
Mhm.
Because there's like the grave diggers on there are hilarious, um, with their dialogue, which I want to mention too, because I do think their dialogue and some other stuff is a key to like understanding. I think part of what Fulci was trying to get at with this movie. I think that, I mean, yes, it is chaotic, it is all over the place, but I do think there's some kind of thematic through line. But part of it has to do with this town, which keeps saying, "Oh, the original this was the site of the original Salem. Like the real Salem isn't real. We actually burned witches and stuff." And so it's this trope of a a past sin that is coming back to haunt them. He doesn't quite connect the Salem witch trial stuff with Father Thomas, but there is this idea that these people in this town are paying the price
Mm.
for something horrible that their ancestors did hundreds of years ago. Kind of sort of similar, actually, to the beginning of the Beyond, except in that case, there's no clear indication that the people in the present day story have any connection to the people who committed the sin in the first, by killing Shrike in the beginning of that movie. But
Yeah.
but again, you could see that Fulci is trying out these themes, and he's trying to see what works. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of what I think fed into the creation of the Beyond by doing it with this movie. Although, I mean, granted, this trope, especially the Salem thing in the past trope, it's been done in other better movies. I can't think of any title off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's been done that way. Um, I guess Rob Zombie's Lords of Salem kind of did that to the best possible version. Maybe, I don't know. I've only seen parts of Lord of Salem. I haven't finished the whole thing.
Oh, I
But
love that movie.
oh yeah, it was good. Oh good.
It's an
So
acquired taste. There's more people out there who probably hate that movie than they do that love it, like me.
but yeah, it all builds to like it just and the whole thing's kind of cross cuts back and forth between the people in Dunwich dealing with the deaths and the zombies slowly popping up everywhere, killing more people, things getting crazier and creepier, and then Christopher George and Katerina McCall trying to freaking find Dunwin or Dunwich, sorry. Dun Dunwin is the gummy bears' town. Sorry. Dunwich. The and then they finally get there. They team up with psychiatrist and his patient Jean or whatever. She dies clearly, but yeah, they don't come together until like the very end of the movie, which is a thing I think you can get away with in novels. You can't really get away with that very well in screenplays, I think, but that's what we have here. I do think that the psychiatrist kind of emerges as the hero of this because Fulci, I think, is trying to put in his preoccupation with Freudian psychology into this movie. The Freudian psychologist is the only one who can stop the power of the evil of Dunwich, and he's the only one who seems immune to it. And he's the one who kind of saves the day at the end, surprisingly. This movie almost ends up being Fulci's most, in terms of the struggle of good versus evil, it almost ends up kind of being his most conventional and I would dare say lighthearted film, if it weren't for the ending, which we'll talk about that in due time. But yeah,
So,
it's kind of like I said, it's Freudian, but also I think it's Freudian in the sense that like Freudian in the kind of themes of like sexuality, but also like I think if you notice that, like, what do I say in here? Like, everything, almost all the males in this movie are awful, except for the psychiatrist, Dr.
Yeah.
Jerry. That's his name. All the men are awful or perverts, like the two gravediggers, like Bob. They're always talking about sex, or even Dr. Jerry's patient, Jean. All she's talking about is dating and sex. Like everything, there's this whole like sexual undertone to everything.
Yeah.
Weird way. I mean, they even talk about Bob as this kind of son, this bastard son of a woman of, quote, easy virtue, quote unquote, who is branded as a witch. And there's that trope again.
Yep.
So, oh yeah, that's what it is. It's like, this movie, I think, is weirdly under its fixation on pornography and maleness being the problem. Like, it's really strange how, oh yeah, and there's all these lines that come up, like, the gravediggers are sitting around eating a sandwich while they're burying Katerina McCall, saying, looking at porn and saying, "Honey, you give me the dirtiest thoughts. I'm telling you, you're going to end up a dirty old man, a pervert, a peeping Tom." This is literally dialogue from the movie.
Yeah.
Fulci was never good at writing dialogue, but like, talk about boxed lunches. Like, who says that? The guy says, "I saw a porno flick once where this guy got so carried away he jumped himself to death. Too much of a good thing, I guess. Yeah, but what a way to go."
Fulci stylized dialogue. It's kind of like the dialogue in the scene in the bar with the three guys who are always hanging at the bar.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, they are so just out of place. Like, what are they there for? And then I realized, oh, they're kind of like the Greek chorus.
Yes, they're like a Greek chorus or the what do you call it? The comic relief because of the banter they have with one another.
Yeah. Like, there's the movie keeps cutting back and forth between these three guys in Dunwich who are just kind of gossiping about all the stuff that's going on in the movie and the plot. And slowly but surely, weird phenomena starts happening to the bar. A mirror breaks, and like weird noises start happening, and they're like, "Well, that's interesting."
Exactly. I only noticed that this last time I saw it. I was like, "Huh, these are some odd scenes with the people in the bar."
I know, right? It's so wild.
And they're the only ones that are like, they're actually humorous. Those scenes are actually humorous because of the three people.
Oh, there is much intentional and unintentional humor had in this film. It may be his funniest zombie movie, probably, because I don't remember laughing so out loud watching Zombie as I did watching this movie. But yeah, oh my goodness. So, and we mentioned like Katerina McCall is a medium.
Mm-hmm.
She has this supposed death during the beginning. And then it was kind of hard for me to get my bearings too, because she seemed to die like that. And then the camera kind of shifts focus, the POV of the scenes, to this like older medium. And she has this very hilarious scene with this very stereotypical African-American cop trying to explain everything, and brings up kind of one of the tropes of, or one of the MacGuffins of, actually it's not really a MacGuffin. It's a trope. It's a trope that all three of the City of the Living Deads have, which is there's a cursed book. There's always a cursed book. There's some kind of tome of Lovecraftian horror, some kind of tome of ancient evil that, in the Beyond, drives the plot, or at least is fixated on by the main characters, or I think it does something else in House by the Cemetery. In this movie, this is probably when Fulci kind of first experiments with that, but he does so with a book that actually does exist, which is kind of weird. He does it with the Book of Enoch, of all things. Nice. Yeah. And like the old medium tries to tie the whole thing to the Book of Enoch, that somehow this whole thing is prophesied by the Book of Enoch. I have read the Book of Enoch. It does not.
Oh, have you?
So what?
Have you?
Oh yeah, it's not hard to find. I have this. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. Uh, when sidebar here, a little bit of theology here. The Book of Enoch, like I said, I actually got it in a collection um, of uh, of of books that were not cut out of the Old Testament or the New Testament, but like didn't make the cut, as it were. So we translated this Bible study kind of translated them literally to English, and the Book of Enoch was actually a book purportedly from the prophet Enoch, who was like the seventh born from Adam in the Old Testament, and he talks a lot about in it as Enoch being a character who is kind of the go-between between God and these watcher angels who rebelled against God and came down to earth and crossbred with human women and had mutant babies that were giants. And those giants are mentioned in Genesis chapter 3. They're right there. But if you don't have the context of the Book of Enoch, you have no idea what they're talking about.
Oh.
And that's probably why a lot of some scholars in the early church tried very hard to get the Book of Enoch in the canon. They failed ultimately. They just believed that the Holy Spirit was leading them away from that. It's very strange. It talks a lot about hell. Enoch actually goes to hell and gives us a little tour of it. But yeah, it's against the backdrop of Noah's flood and all of that. So, and actually, the Book of Enoch is quoted in the New Testament a couple of times. So Jesus and his disciples were familiar with it. I'm not sure how much Fulci is actually familiar with it, because all the stuff that is quoted, it's not there. It is not in the book. So I guess he might have just like seen a copy of it and thought it sounded cool. I think that's what he thought. He does this trope to much better effect in The Beyond, where he uses the Book of Ibion, which again is a book that does exist, but only in literature. But Enoch actually does. Yeah, Enoch does actually exist in physical form. So highly recommend it, though. So it's not really a cursed book MacGuffin, because nobody uses it other than to kind of create mystery and but that's what it is. It's just there. But if you know anything about it and everything, it'll make you go, "Oh, that's interesting." But anyway, she lays out that old lady, that older medium, does do some good screenwriting stuff for us. She lays out the stakes pretty clearly. We do not have to guess what's at stake in this movie, because very early on she says that the gates of hell are opened in the city of the living dead, which is Dunwich. So we don't have to guess whether City of the Living Dead is a metaphor for anything, because it's literally a town. A cursed city, and if the gates are not closed on midnight on All Saints' Day, the gates will stay open, and no corpse will be able to rest, and the dead will take over the earth. So you must close the gates. So that's how we know what we must do. And that also kind of makes, and now that I think about it, that kind of makes a little bit of sense, in the sense that the beginning, like 2 or 3 days before All Saints' Day, the priest hangs himself, goes around, builds a little mini army of zombies in anticipation of this event. And then after midnight on All Saints' Day, or All Souls' Day, then the others will come up and rise. That's the idea, I think. But you're right. He starts killing seemingly random people up until those days. But I think he's, like I said, I think he's trying to embalm them in a kind of. But the question we have to ask ourselves is why? I mean, sometimes that's a fool's errand when you're talking Fulci, but sometimes it isn't. I think that, his first couple of victims, some of them are just like, get their brains squished. But the most famous kill of this movie is probably the poor girl who is making out with her boyfriend, who's played by Makai Solari, who is the metal-faced guy in Demons, and also the director of many classic giallos like Cemetery Man and The Church. This is like his first acting role. and he's making out with his girlfriend in the car, and all of a sudden, here comes the evil priest. And he just like stares at her, and she stares at him. And he's staring at both of them, not running, just sitting there in the car. And this amazing gore effect happens that makes the movie that is one of the many things that makes this movie worth watching, is she starts bleeding from her eyes.
Yep.
And Kevin, it looks so real. It looks like her eyes are really bleeding and bulging out of her head. And then all of a sudden her mouth starts to bleed, and then her literal intestines and guts start coming out of her mouth.
Yep.
And they just keep coming and coming and coming, to the point where like you can tell when they switch from person to puppet, but it still looks horrible in the best possible way.
Yeah, and her boyfriend's just sitting right next to her, just watching all of this happen. It's not a fast happening. It's slow because it starts off small, and then all of a sudden the intestines start coming out, and the intestines are not fast. It's like like literally everything that's inside her body coming out. And I'm like, he's just over there just about to scream, and it's it is funny. Now I think when I was a kid, I don't think I found it as funny. I thought it was gory and probably terrifying, but now it is a little funny now.
Yeah, and what sells it is the fact that like the bleeding from the eyes. Like I couldn't figure out how they did it, and then I looked it up. Turns out that the brilliance of the effects guys was the fact that they utilized the actress's hair in order to do the effect. She has long hair, and they combed it right over the edges of her eyes, so that then they ran the tube under her hair and right up to the edge of her eyelid and pumped the blood through that way, so that you could not see the tube. Like you might see it a little bit in the 4K version, but oh my gosh, it looks so realistic because they utilized that hair and had her be still, and it looks so real. And the blood is really good too. It's like it looks really like real blood. It doesn't look like the orangey fake blood that Romero used. It's pretty amazing. And it's not the only time that Fulci does the eye bleeding thing. There's a couple other times too.
Yeah.
Katerina McCall does it twice. She almost gets gut vomited by two other zombies way later on in the climax. But and every time it looks great. It's just a simple effect that y'all out there wanting to do low budget, effects out there, learn from that. Just simple little tricks like that can be effective. But yeah, that's one of the things that is the highlight of this otherwise very hit or miss movie. We should probably also talk about. We've talked about the menagerie of characters at this point. We haven't talked about the kid, who is.
Oh yeah.
He's sort of, kind of, not the linchpin on which this thing holds, but he kind of does carry the third act for a little bit. What is his freaking name? Oh, he has a funny sounding name too. I'm trying to remember. Oh,
I remember myself.
John, that's his name. Little John. Oh gosh, Little John. So Little John is traumatized when his older sister Emily gets killed by Father Thomas, who, by the way, I think the way Father Thomas kills her is just like he just kind of smothers her face with rotting goo, I guess. I'm not sure why, but that's how she dies. And then she comes back and her face looks pretty much the same, except covered in, I guess, this rot. But he sees her outside his bedroom window. She just appears, and it's very eerie, especially because it's from this kid's point of view. But he ends up this kid kind of ends up in the care of our psychiatrist, Dr. Jerry, and then, oh gosh, I forgot about the fact that he ends up with his grandma and grandpa, and then they end up getting slaughtered right after our main characters get covered in maggots. Like the window literally just bursts open and a plume of maggots just covers them. They do not get out of the room. They just kind of take the full blast of maggots. And like, I think one of the coolest kind of little images of this movie is the fact that after the maggot storm is over, Dr. Jerry's telephone is covered in maggots. And he just picks it up. I don't know why. There's something interesting about these living maggots on his also white telephone, and he just kind of listens to this call, and the call's to tell him that poor John's grandma and grandpa got exploded basically by zombies. Like their blood is just so much that it's leaking from the upstairs bedroom down into like his table or something, and poor John has to tell them what's going on. It's super traumatic and also very artistic in a weird way. The way that Fulci, shoots the whole thing. But yeah, John has this really cool kind of like chase scene with Emily and Father Thomas, where these zombies are just kind of sort of chasing him through the streets. And you think, he's dead. This kid is gone. He is donezo. But all of a sudden, blah, out comes Dr. Jerry. And he's like, go into the cop car. They'll take care of you. Meanwhile, right in front of him is this freaking zombie Emily just staring at him. And zombie Emily does nothing to stop him. And then a weird thing happens that kind of, I didn't understand at first, but now I get it. How it doesn't make sense how Dr. Jerry figured this out, but like he stares at zombie Emily and zombie Emily stares at him, and you're thinking she's gonna rip his brains out or make him throw his guts out. Nope. She does nothing because he closes his eyes and like wills her to disappear basically. And I'm like, why him? Why does he have this power? And then I realized, oh, it's because he's the rational Freudian psychiatrist, because he doesn't believe in this sort of stuff. So that's what gives him power to overcome the zombie hypnosis, the telekinesis. That's what gives him the ability to basically be the hero of this thing, even when intrepid Christopher George gets his brains knocked out.
Who you're not thinking that will happen to him? So,
what?
You don't think that's going to happen to him, since you kind of are, you think you're almost following him for most of the movie.
Oh yeah, it's so weird. Like again, like there's no main character in this movie. It just goes from person to person to person. You have no idea who to hold on to, especially if this is your first exposure to Fulci. You have no idea how important Katerina McCall is, how much in love with her Fulci apparently is. You cannot. There's nobody really to. I mean, in Zombie, you've got like the two. You've got Tisha Farrow's character and David, what's his name? You've got those two.
Yep.
But with this movie, there's nobody to latch on to. You're just along for the ride, and you have no idea what's going to happen. And while I was rewatching it, I didn't realize until now that, like we said before, pacing is not a problem with this movie. The last 38 minutes of this movie are packed.
Yeah.
It's absolutely packed. We've got head drilling, we mentioned before, Bob, R.I.P. We got floating zombies, bridge jumping zombies. I forgot about that. We got gale force winds filled with maggots. Little John's grandparents getting turned inside out and exploded off screen. We got zombies walking through walls, eating the bar patrons. That happens in the third act.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep. Oh.
Yeah, the whole last 38 minutes of this movie. Like, and then they finally get to the cemetery. They get under the cemetery, and all of that takes place in less than 20 minutes. It's nuts. It's crazy. It's almost like Fulci was writing the script, and like he looked up from his typewriter, because for sure this guy didn't have a computer. He looked up from his typewriter, and he was like, Fragoon, I got to make this movie go boom. I mean, he looked at his page count and was like, I got to finish everything now. So he's like, I've been typing it for an hour. I gotta go vroom. And he does.
No,
yeah.
that's the thing about this movie is when you're watching it, there's as much as it is on a chaotic storytelling thing. Once it starts, you kind of go for the ride. And if you're someone who likes gore and you like not knowing what's going to happen next, you can't help but follow this damn movie. I think it's one of the great things about it. It's not predictable. I mean, this is not a predictable film, and I think that's one of the greatest things about Fulci's whole filmography. You never know how the fuck they're gonna end because he doesn't know how he's gonna end them.
No, he doesn't. Although, I mean, if that's different from how like I tend to write things. Like whenever I write stuff, I always know how it starts, and I have to know how it ends. I might change the ending a little bit, but like I always have to know how it begins and how it ends. Everything in the middle can go wherever, but I gotta land that. I gotta land that ending. I don't think, like I said, I don't think Fulci thinks that way at all. I think he just takes that list of scenes that he's written and just rearranges them and scrambles them up, and then strings them together with in this case, this movie, with the barest, thinnest string of a plot.
Yeah.
That goes vaguely from whence. I mean, there's so much in this movie. There is so freaking much that even we can't possibly spoil this movie. We cannot spoil it because it's like a song that you could listen. We could recite all the lyrics to, and it still wouldn't spoil it because you still haven't experienced it for yourself. You haven't heard the song, and there's so many little details and things that just keep coming up that make you go, "What the heck? Why is that in there?" There's all this weird stuff with the funeral home and the funeral home director too. It's just like you could watch this probably 2, maybe 3 times at the most and get everything, but you got to do that work. You got to do that scene work.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. The more I see the film, the more I both love it and hate it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I will say, enhancing your enjoyment of this would be watching The Beyond right after it. Because I feel like watching this movie is kind of like reading the rough draft of Star Wars. You know, because like the first draft, there's a comic book of it that was made like a couple of years ago, where they took George Lucas's first draft of Star Wars and turned it into a comic, and that first draft is wildly different than the final Star Wars New Hope that got up there. Is the draft where Luke is a girl and her name is Rey, which is, by the way, that's where that came from, and Obi-Wan is called Luke Starkiller, and Han Solo is a green alien. It's so different, but you can see the bare bones of what became Star Wars. It's the same kind of thing where like you can see the bare bones of what became The Beyond and House by the Cemetery in this movie. It is kind of like reading that. And again, I'm not sure why the heck any of some of the stuff happened. Like, why does Bob get drilled in the head as opposed to just like getting strangled? Why does any of like I said, I think there's embalming going on, except for there's nothing Egyptian about this Father Thomas character. That would have been nice to see. Maybe some like Egyptian black magic books hanging around his Catholic church. But like the music, also I forgot to mention. We're gonna come back to this. Is like part of what makes that jam-packed third act sing so much is Fabio Fabrizi's music.
Yes, let's get to that because I do not want to forget about the music.
Yeah. So like, what's your favorite track on this? Because like there's like the main theme, which is very very downbeat. But then I think my favorite one though is a track that's called Mysteries Apotheosis. I cannot say the word. But it's like the main theme of this movie, but it only shows up like towards the very end, and then maybe like a little bit in the beginning. But what's funny about it is that this song that's mostly just an audio sample of monks chanting on a piano is so beautiful and has such a driving beat. but at the same time, you listen to it, and it's basically his theme from Zombie. It's the same daggum thing. The only thing that's different is the chorus. I would love to, but at the same time, though, I like the build up in the beginning with the male voices, these eerie male voices, better than the build up than the first bit in the theme from Zombie. The theme of Zombie is very spare. It's just a boom, boom, boom.
It repeats. That one repeats a lot. I think the score for this one's a much more now the main theme for this movie is very iconic because every score that I have, like a compilation score of his music, always has the theme music for this on it. But shit, I was looking for something because I know you'd appreciate it, but I don't think I remember where I put the goddamn thing. Sucks. But they just released a book of Fabrizi and his music, and his career, which is amazing. I haven't read it yet. I thought it was like right around my desk.
For those of you at home who cannot see us, which is everybody, Kevin just got up from his seat, rummaged around through his huge library of stuff, and like almost got killed by some books. Not really, but you can imagine him going through his like dusty library looking for this book.
I got it because I think I ordered it during Christmas, and it's a signed book, so it might be upstairs with one of my signed books. I had to wait for it to arrive because I think they didn't ship it until it was released. But it's a thick book, and it goes over all of his entire career, and he signed it, so I think it's an autobiography type of book. But I had to have it, it's just amazing, and I don't think there's enough books out there about some of these great composers. I have you can't, the audience can't see it, but over the last year I've been trying to study up on some of my composers. So I've got this one, which is like all the major the history of film music, which is and then another one that I think there's several of them that have to deal with Hans Zimmer. This one's like interviews that he did with other composers, which is really cool because there's a movie that goes with this as well, which I have not watched, but I have. Because the thing is, I love music for films, and a lot of us horror fans out there do. And the thing is, Fulci has some amazing scores for all of his movies. Even his lesser ones are pretty goddamn solid in terms of the score. So, but this one here, you're right. I think this one's a much better score than Zombie was, even though I've seen Zombie a billion times. And I have that score. I don't have the Beyond, actually. I'm surprised.
Yeah, actually, the version of the Beyond that I have comes with the soundtrack CD, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
If I only had a CD player to play it on, though. Ugh, technology.
I'm surprised I don't have the Beyond. I have a lot of Fulci's random scores when I can find them. I have mostly compilations. So there'll be a Lucio Fulci film score compilation. I think I have 2 or 3 of them, and they have like the themes of most of his films. Just scatterbrained. It's hard because they're Italian soundtracks, and you have to purchase them as imports and shit like that, and
yeah,
it's expensive to get imports.
Oh yeah.
So,
I mean, like, you can, like, for those of you out there who don't know, you can listen to Mysteries of this pretty easily on YouTube. Actually, that's how I listen to it. Actually, every time I sit down to write anything horror, Mysteries Apotheosis is queued up, and I listen to it to get myself in the headspace to write some scary stuff. But what's funny is, what the genius of Fabio Fabrizi, the maestro, who is still alive and still making music. I think one of his most recent horror movies was the new Puppet Master movie that came out a couple of years ago, The Littlest Reich. He did the music for that. But his genius is that, and this might have also been Fulci's kind of direction too, but if it was, then Fabio kind of carried it over to the rest of his thing, because his thing is like, and we may have mentioned this before, but maybe not, but his thing is like, he says, "You tickle the ear while you're terrifying the eye." Like, so all of his almost all of his music are beautiful. They're like, especially in the Beyond. The Beyond is probably his best example of his beautiful music, melodic, Lydian scale, uplifting, almost kind of piano score, synthesizer score with the most horrific images you can possibly imagine.
Mm.
That juxtaposition is part of what makes Fulci's The Beyond and others more disturbing, by doing songs and tones that seemingly are the exact wrong thing for it, but yet it works because it makes it that much more disturbing. Almost, I think it kind of subconsciously almost suggests almost that, like, the movie itself is kind of delighting in the horror, and that disturbs you. Or might put in your mind this idea that you are watching a movie made by a madman. That he is delighting in this and thinks it's beautiful when somebody throws up their guts, literally, even their liver comes out of their mouth, or that, like a million different, or like someone's eye, like a zombie, where someone's eyes get, plucked out by a splinter. Like that there is this weird disconnect. But if you listen to the music just by itself, some of it's beautiful and epic and amazeballs. And that's the word I can think of. And in the movie, it really helps you to pull you along, because, like we said before, Fulci had many strong suits visually, tonally, but my goodness, directing actors was never his strong suit. The performances are, especially in this movie, are iffy at best and weirdly out of place at worst. But no matter when it doesn't work, no matter what's happening, no matter how off the rails this movie gets, Fabio Fabrizzi's music pulls me back in every single time. Yeah. Even though it's really only about 4 or 5 songs over and over again, over an hour and a half movie. It's really all it is.
Oh yeah, that's right. It is pretty short.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But before we get any further towards the tail end of this, I do want to talk about what is probably what I think is the highlight of this movie. I mean, we've talked about these little individual scenes that many other people probably think is the highlight, but for me, I think it's super cool when they think that it's too late. Midnight has struck. All Saints' Day is here. It's night. And yet there's no discussion between our 3 main characters, Christopher George, the reporter, Katerina McCall, and, Dr. Jerry, our friendly neighborhood psychiatrist, about how we're going to save the world now. They just decide, let's go and break into Father Thomas's tomb. Maybe they're going to put a stake through his heart or something. Actually, in a weird way, I think the zombies in this movie have more in common with vampires in a weird way.
It's an interesting concept, yeah.
Yeah, if you think about it, maybe that's why they die the way that they do. But because die, quote unquote. But they open up his tomb, and there is a secret passageway behind the tomb, which of course has no body in it. And it gets down to catacombs under the cemetery.
Yep.
Which thankfully this is not in New Orleans like The Beyond. This is at least somewhat plausible that there might be some catacombs under a Georgia cemetery that might kind of exist. But they go through these caves that just get weirder and weirder, get attacked by some zombies and some rats. We're down to only 2 main characters, with Dr. Jerry and Katerina McCall. And then Mystery's Apophysis kicks in right after they go down and down and down and see the ceiling of this cave that is filled with skeletons. And the skeletons, oh my gosh, the only thing I could compare it to, it's like art. They've seen, like, Fulci staged these skeletons, this bunch of bones, like crawling out from the ceiling seemingly and frozen in place almost like he's trying to reproduce this famous painting called like Fallen Rebel Angels.
I think I've heard of that one actually.
Yeah, which has all these bodies like falling from heaven in this weird kind of mesh of flesh, and I think that's kind of what he's trying to suggest with this clump of bones. It's like, it's almost like and sometimes it looks almost like a chandelier of bones and cobwebs, and it's beautiful because it's lit with this ethereal blue light. It's just for whatever reason in this cave that has no light source, there's always blue light coming from somewhere. And they just keep going and going, and all of a sudden, zombies start coming up out of the ground, very zombie style. And in comes the theme music, and it's awesome because they're coming up, and our two leads are completely oblivious to what's happening. They don't hear it, they don't see it, but they're slowly getting surrounded by these zombies until they get into the center of Father Thomas's lair, which is almost like this weird mini church altar underground.
Yep.
That has a stained glass window that leads to the surface. Why they didn't see this when they were up in the surface, I have no idea. But anyway, it's there, and it looks weird, and it's cool looking. And no one is there until, pop! In comes evil priest Father Thomas, glaring at you. Ah. And now they notice the zombies starting to crawl and surround them. So now we think, oh crap, they're screwed. They have nothing. But Dr. Jerry has the power of logic. And also a random freaking wooden cross that he just picks up and stabs Father Thomas in the crotch with. And this sets him on fire. Father Thomas burns, going like the Thing in John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah.
And then all the other zombies burn like the other creatures in Annihilation. And the theme just goes and escalates, and we think, cool, good has triumphed over evil, or in the very least, logic has triumphed over superstition. If viewers haven't figured this out yet by now, this is kind of Fulci's sort of grudge against the Catholic Church, which isn't as apparent in some of his later films, but if you want to see him go full tilt against the Catholic Church, you got to watch Don't Torture a Duckling. That whole movie is like one big giant scry? Yeah, I'm going with that. Scry against the Catholic Church. But I think that's probably why the Freudian psychiatrist is the hero in this movie. And that's but yet at the same time, it's so weird that Fulci has the psychiatrist use a cross to kill the evil priest. I thought it's so funny that like this, communist atheist Fulci has his hero use a cross to kill the evil. Although he kills him by, again, ramming it in the crotch. Like, why? Because the other zombies he's killed by just sticking them in the stomach, and they just go down. And I'm also trying to figure out why that way. And my theory is this, that at least in the world that this movie is supposed to set in, my theory is that the reason why the iron poker thing that he uses to kill some zombies by stabbing them in the stomach works is because the cemetery is consecrated ground, and that rod is part of the cemetery, so it's consecrated. So I think using it like that is kind of like using a stake to the heart with a vampire. And I think the reason why stabbing them in the stomach works is because oh gosh, I might be giving Fulci too much credit here, but he does know about the Book of Enoch, so maybe he was thinking maybe he did do this on purpose. But in ancient theology or ancient writings, in in the Old Testament, in frickin' Babylonian literature or Near Eastern thought, let's put it that way, it was thought that the seat of your soul the center of your emotions and your personality was in your guts,
Okay.
like your bowels. Like from the sometimes people read some passages from the Old Testament and would say things like from the bottom of my heart. What they're literally saying is from the bottom of my guts. So that's why the Egyptians, incidentally, were so hung up on removing all the internal organs in the chest and in the intestines, because that's where they thought the soul resided. They didn't care about the brain. That's why they pulled it out through your nose. They didn't think that the personality or anything resolved in that. No, they thought it was down in your guts. Later on, we bring that up to the heart being the center of emotions and everything, even though it's just a muscle that pumps blood. But I think that's what may be the reason why is like you take a consecrated object, stab it in the seat of where their soul should be, and that just destroys the whole zombie. Again, why the crotch? Is it
Because you're thinking too much into it. Sexual perversion. We'll go back to his original theme of sexual perversion throughout the whole movie.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. I think that's what it is. It's again the maleness, the pervertedness of what Fulci is projecting onto this priest character, who for him is like the epitome of evil. This possibly pedophilic, maybe, figure who needs to have his wang destroyed, I guess. That's probably that thing. Now, so that brings us to the ending / not ending that is this movie, which there are many theories as to why it is what it is.
So I do have to ask you, and this is actually a good topic to end the conversation on, because this is one of the things that I every time I watch this film, I never know what the hell is going on at the very, very end of this movie, when the two main characters who have survived this ordeal have destroyed the priest, and of course they see John running up to them, and I'm like, so why the hell are they screaming? I've never understood that.
Yeah. So what you see visually, spoilers again, ladies and gentlemen, is two cops that they left John with pull up. John comes out. He sees them. He's happy that they're there. He's like, yay! And he's running towards them. And then they're smiling at him. He's smiling. And then all of a sudden, there's a scream, which is funny. I didn't realize this till I watched it again, that this movie begins with a scream and it ends with a scream.
Oh shit! I remember that. Yeah. Interesting to think about what the hell that all means.
Yeah, it's like, well, I think the fact that the end begins with the scream and ends with the scream could be two things. It's number one, it's maybe Fulci suggesting there's a cycle that happens over and over again. Like maybe this is going to start over again because the priest, the evil Father Thomas, was unsuccessful this time around. Maybe he'll try again next year. But the other thing I think is just like artistic symmetry. This idea of starting where you end, having a scream open and a scream end. So the piece. So I think that's what that is, just artistic symmetry.
Yeah. Go ahead. I want to know your thoughts on this one, because this one always buggles.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but as far as what the frack is going on here, I did some research, and as it turns out, nobody is sure exactly what happened in the post-production of this movie. But if one theory is that the movie originally had a straight-up happy ending, that they were just going to run together and it was just going to freeze frame, cut to credits, and be happy. And Fulci changed his mind and said, "No, I want to have a surprise ending." And was like, "But I have no footage. Let's just end it that way." I do not believe that theory, and I'll tell you why. Because when I watched it again, if you look at Katarina Call's face, her expression does change.
Yes, it does.
From happiness to terror. So there's no way that he went back and shot that. That's just not possible. He didn't have enough money. We know this because of stories about the post-production. Yes. So another theory is that there was a twist ending filmed, but that there was a fire at the studio, and that footage was destroyed. So Fulci had to improvise. I think that's what really happened.
Yeah, I kept thinking that there might be some footage missing in which, that behind the boy they see something, and so they didn't really stop the hell from rising, even though they killed the priest or something. But you don't see that visually in the film. You kind of see this happy thing, and then you just see Katerina just face just change, and then you hear the scream at the end, and that always bugged me. I was like, it's not like the ending to the Beyond from the Beyond. The way that ending is so fucking memorable and iconic, and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah, this is just like the epitome of an overly abrupt ending. What you do see is just like a freeze frame of the kid, the scream, and the movie literally breaks.
Yes, it breaks just enough. Animated break.
It just shatters, literally. It's what you see. And which I think kind of gives more credence to the film was destroyed theory. Because apparently, according to this theory, that the original ending was supposed to be that John is a zombie, and the implication is he's going to kill them, I guess. But we've already established that Dr. Jerry is immune to the zombie powers, so I don't know how this little boy zombie thinks he's going to take both of them. Unless the cops are also zombies. Which I guess that could work too. So I think that's probably what was the original idea, that that the cops and the kid are now zombies. They're going to kill Katerina McCall and Dr. Jerry somehow and like bury them in the ground. And we don't know, but while this craziness is happening, we don't know what's going on in Dunwich. All we know is that the guys in the bar got their butts chomped by some zombies, and that there's a radio emergency broadcast saying, everybody stay in your homes, everybody stay in your homes. That is it. That's all we know. For all we know, all of the other people of Dunwich are all zombies by the end of the movie. We don't know. We do know that all the dead bodies that were in the funeral parlor got up, so we know that happened. But we don't know what's going on in Dunwich. So I like to imagine, personally, that the spirit of Father Thomas got out of his corpse, his burning, ashy corpse, and somehow flew into John, and that's what they see. Like, Fulci could have saved this movie by just inserting a still image of Father Thomas's evil-looking face. And
anything!
And suggesting that he is now occupying this boy's body, and that he's going to somehow dispose of them, but now he only has these two zombie cops at his beck and call. So maybe I think the implication was that, well, I failed to take over the world, so maybe I'll just inhabit this boy for a year until I can try again next year. And I think next year he'll probably try again to raise all the other zombies up. What's interesting too about Dunwich is that it's apparently impossible to get there. Like, remember the directions that the other priest gives to Katerina McCall and Christopher George is you go off on this dirt road that's blocked by like a tree or some rubble or something. I wrote it down, but I can't remember. But like getting to Dunwich is super hard. So exiting it must be also hard. So it seems like Father Thomas's plan is not very well thought out. Like, why are you going to stage a zombie apocalypse from this little out of the way New England town that's like super inaccessible? It seems like a really bad plan, if you ask me.
It is.
So I think that's what happened with this movie. I think that's what happens at the end. But by then, you've seen so much craziness that I don't think you'll feel that let down, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen this.
No. But the thing is, I think this is really one of those films, in my opinion, now after having watched it. It is a film for Fulci fans out there and fans of zombie films who just want to see a different type of zombie film, to be honest with you. Gore fans will love this because it's a gore film. But I think I think with everything out now that we've seen in terms of zombie films and how gory people's tastes have changed because of The Walking Dead and the Dawn of the Dead remake and so on and so forth, that became popular and popular horror movies, popular zombie movies, and I think this one, it has to be for those fans, because I can tell anyone out there or ask anyone, have you ever seen the Beyond? And a lot of my friends will say, yeah, I've seen the Beyond. They haven't seen some, and more of them, maybe less of them, have seen Zombie. I guarantee most of them have never seen City of the Living Dead, much less House by the Cemetery. Probably more of them have seen Don't Torture a Duckling, or
I still haven't seen Don't Torture a Duckling. I really do want to. I hear it's good.
We had this discussion about that one too, because I told you I've seen all of his films. I literally own every Fulci film in some form or fashion, whether it's Blu-ray, DVD, or VHS. I've even got some I'm still working on some of the erotic films he did as a director before he started doing horror films, because a lot of those just have not had a U.S. release. So,
because you are a pervert, I assume.
Nah, I mean, everyone gets their start somewhere. He did a lot, and the thing about Italian films, they're more, because they were the 60s and 70s. They're not so much porno films as they're like the British with their nudie cutie films. They have nudity, but they're not like porno films. So. Or Herschel Gordon Lewis, who did the same thing in his early career. He had a couple of nudie cutie films, but they're not really porno films. They're nudie films. They just have nudity in them, Fulci did some of those, like the Eroticist and some of the other ones. I randomly have picked up the ones that have had a U.S. Release, and then some of his other films are slowly making their way here to the U.S., which is sad. I wish all of his films were available. They're not all available. And he did films from every genre there is. And, he was very prolific. So
by the time he started Zombie, he was known more for comedy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how he got that assignment, because Zombie was like a work for hire thing.
Uh-huh.
Like, I mean, he must have just been there when they were scrambling, looking, when the first director just dropped out. They must have hey, Lucio, can you do this thing? It's like, sure, I don't do it. I don't know what a zombie movie is, but I will do it. So that's probably what he did.
I just wish that more of the books, because I have a lot of books on Fulci, and which is how I know I've watched so many of them, because before they started releasing all the different books on him and Dario Argento, it was kind of hard to figure out what films were his, because back then, I say back then because I make myself seem old, we didn't have the internet to make it so easy to find movies. So a lot of them I knew about from simply reading the books about him. And I think him and Dario Argento are two of the most famous Italian horror directors who have like plenty of books out there about them now.
And Mario Bava, probably, right?
Oh, and thank you, Mario Bravo. Mario Bava. In which I have his books too. One day I'll have to go through my entire collection. I went through a whole phase where I owned like every book about every horror director I could find. Now I've read so many of them, I don't pick up any of the newer ones. But for people out there who are listening to the podcast, and I wanted to make sure I told Thomas this, the book on Fabio Frizzi's is Backstage and Beyond. It is an autobiography, and you can still buy the signed copy when you find it online. You can go find it online, and hopefully I'll remember to add the website to the whatchamacallit. I have not read it yet because I got it for myself for Christmas, and it's sitting on my bookshelf because I had to have it because it was signed. So I thought that was a really cool thing to have, is that book signed. And it's still relatively cheap. They did like a limited number of them. I guess they haven't sold all the signed ones, so it's about $55 to get the book. And it's worth it. It's worth it. If you're a fan of the music. So I wanted to make sure everyone knew that, because you can go out there and get it if you're a fan. And like I said, his music adds so much to this film, so much. It, it it is an experience watching this film. I was lucky enough to watch it when I was younger, and then I watch it now, whereas Thomas saw it during the pandemic when he finally caught up with it. Uh, but it's always a pleasure and an experience to go back and rewatch some of these films because it's been years since I've seen it. It's been years. It's not one of my favorite Fulci movies, so I haven't seen it nearly as much as The Beyond or Zombie, which I've seen more times than I ever care to mention.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I have to say about this film. I do hope people check it out if they've never seen it and or revisit it because it is a really good a film to get you inundated with the world of the Gates of Hell that Fulci created because it's one of if you know nothing else about Fulci, he created the Gates of Hell trilogy and this is part of it and that's one of those things. So
Yeah. Fun fact, I mentioned earlier that the cemetery in the beginning is a real cemetery. It is, in fact, the historic Midway Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia, which is only about 37 plus minutes away from Savannah proper. Lots of other parts of this movie that are supposed to be in New York and Massachusetts are in Savannah. According to IMDb, so I don't know exactly the veracity of this, but according to IMDb, that this cemetery that's featured in the beginning and ending of this movie was used by General Sherman, he of the March to the Sea fame, used that cemetery, has a big thick wall, as a cattle corral back during the Civil War in 1864. And at the time, they had a lot of graves that just had some wooden crosses for headstones. And so the cattle got hungry and ate some of the crosses.
Oh, Jesus.
I didn't realize cows ate crosses, Kevin, because I'm a big city boy. I don't know nothing about cows except that they moo and make milk. I don't,
my God!
I don't know. Do cows eat crosses? Is that a thing?
Supposed to know. I don't know how to milk a cow and take care of a cow.
But apparently, that's why when Fulci shot the zombie rising from the ground thing, that they actually disinterred a real body because daggum cows ate the wooden crosses 100 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Okay, interesting facts there. Any last thoughts about City of the Living Dead?
Well, Kevin, I got to make a confession to you.
Uh-oh.
I've been busy. I've been dealing with a lot lately.
Okay.
That means that I had a Schwarzenegger alternator for the big scene where Jerry the psychiatrist, Jerry the intrepid shrink, would have been played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I had a Schwarzenegger alternator for that scene where he rams a huge piece of crosswood into our villain's crotch. But I forgot to write them down.
Oh my God!
So I dropped the freaking ball when it comes to the Schwarzenegger alternator, and that scene just would have lent itself to something like that. So I apologize to everybody out there. I am very sorry that I cannot end this podcast with something along the lines of, "Here, I got wood. Now you do too."
Oh my God!
That is the one I've got off the dome. I've got wood.
That's okay because we're gonna add some more Fulci film. I don't know if we have any more on our list, but I'm definitely gonna add them up because we're already started. We gotta finish off with the rest of the Gates of Hell trilogy. So we'll have to add that one on, and then we'll have to add on the ones some of the other ones. So for future reference for you, Thomas, if there's any of the ones that you cannot find, let me know. I'll let you borrow. Like I said, I have every one of them. So I don't think there's anyone else, any of my special guests who appreciate Fulci like you do. So it's always good for us to talk about Fulci every once in a while, to add him to our podcast because Otherwise, I don't think I'd ever get around to talking about someone.
Yeah. So then I guess we got to figure out what we're going to rate this puppy, Kevin.
I know. What are we gonna rate this one?
Well, and what object or thing or rotting piece of something are we going to use to rate it?
I
I'm
know I would do
gonna.
mine.
Well, I'll go ahead. Okay. So, you want to go first?
Well, okay. Okay, I'll go first. I'll go first
You
this
know,
time.
Kevin, you go.
I never go first. But the thing is, I don't think I noticed how often this showed up in the film until I watched it again. And I was like, I have to make comment on the fact that we're seeing, because Father Thomas is our main villain. But you know what? A lot of the times they show Father Thomas hanging. And I know I probably shouldn't say something like that, but he's always hanging as a ghost in this movie. So I'm gonna give this film three hanging Father Thomases. No matter how controversial that is, I would give it three hanging Father Thomases. Because, like I said before, I do enjoy this film and I've seen it a lot. But over the years, for me, this one did not age nearly as well as The Beyond or Zombie or I don't care what anyone says. I still love House by the Cemetery. I like the concept of that one. So
Even Bob. House by the Cemetery's little boy, Bob. Like, it's even that kid.
you know what? There's a lot of annoying kids in a lot of Fulci films. I don't think he knew how to direct kids. Those kids in lots of his movies are just annoying.
He barely knew how to direct adults. Of course, he didn't know how to do kids. But I'm glad you picked the Hanging Priest because I feel like that, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know very much about tarot cards or anything, but I could swear the Hanging Priest or the Hanging Man is like a tarot card, isn't it?
Oh, okay. I don't know.
There's something disturbing and weird and mystical about that image because like the Hanging Man, I'm sure like is a tarot card in the typical tarot card deck. So that's a good thing. I think I'm gonna pick I don't know what I was gonna pick, but I'm not picking that. I could go with some guts, or because there's a lot of them, and nobody did guts quite like Fulci. And or I could go with Dead Rotting Baby, or even a blow up doll. I'm really tempted to do the blow up doll just for the heck of it. She could just be in someone's pool. She looks just like that. I mean,
we are so horrible.
I know, right? It would have been funny if instead of just like spontaneously combusting, if Father Thomas and his zombie horde deflated like a punch, like a blow up doll just gets.
Oh shit!
But I think what I'm gonna go with, is maggots, because this movie is all about maggots, which is funny because if you listen carefully, Katerina McCall doesn't seem to know the difference between maggots and worms. Because she says it, that refers to them as worms. I'm like, that's not what that is. They become flies. Worms don't become anything else. But I love the image. I love the image of Dr. Jerry the Shrink. His landline phone we mentioned earlier, just this off-white phone covered in maggots. When he brushes off the receiver and answers it to hear what John has say. I feel like that maggot-covered telephone defines this movie, stylistically speaking. And I'm not going to defend that much further. I'm just going to say this movie is. Yeah, I'm wavering to like 2.5 to 3. Like when I first saw it, it was definitely like a solid 3 maggot phones. But now, maybe it's just my mood. But now I feel like it's 2.5 maggot phones out of 5. It doesn't really work overall, but I feel like we've had a really kind of nice raucous discussion about it, but I feel like okay, this is a movie you should probably watch with friends, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
I don't think you will enjoy this as much by yourself with the blanket, covered over your head, or in your office late at night like I did, watching it. I feel like you need to get a couple of friends together, or get at least one weird friend that you like, Um, just sit down and watch this on Tubi or whatever, wherever you get it. God bless Tubi though. They are doing the good work, and just sit and enjoy it with whatever libations you are comfortable with.
Mhm.
I But yeah, I think if it's standing on its own, I don't think it really like floats to the surface. But watching it in conjunction with these other films we've talked about, yeah,
Mhm.
it's a really nice kind of support to those other things as a night of undeadness. And also, like, put it on Halloween, put it on in the background during a Halloween party. Things might get awkward during the blow up doll sequence, but yeah, no, when the gore stuff starts happening, yeah, some people might lose their lunch a little bit at the cocktail part of the party, but yeah, it'll be great. uh but like, just as a film, upon its standing on its own, I don't think it's not as accomplished as the others. It's so much to the point where on this watch, I like I have the new 4K of this on my wish list, on my Amazon wish list, and I'm thinking about just go ahead and getting the Blu-ray, or maybe not even getting it at all, because I feel my affinity for City of the Living Dead kind of waning a little bit. Although my affinity for the music has not wavered one bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm comfortable giving it 2.5 maggot phones
All
out of.
right. All right. And with that, I want to thank you, Thomas, for joining me on another adventure through Lucio Fulci's world of horror. Want to thank everyone out there who's been listening to the show. Hopefully, you will have a greater appreciation of the movie. And if not, you can all eat some maggots. With that, make sure to check out some of our other previous episodes. Make sure to like and become a subscriber to both this podcast on your favorite podcast app. Also, check out our other podcast, our sister podcast on our Patreon page, Conversations in 4Color, which allows me, myself, and I to talk everything about manga, comic books, and graphic novels. Make sure to check out our websites for all the amazing stuff that we have coming up. And with that, I want to thank you all for joining us today, and have a great day, everyone. Goodbye.
John.
Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, produced by Kevin L. Powers, executive produced by Kelly A. Inoka, and originally filmed via Zoom technology. Conversations in Horror is hosted by Kevin L. Powers and co-hosted by various horror film lovers and filmmakers. To learn more about Mr. Powers, please make sure to check out his Patreon page and other social media platforms. Conversations in Horror is copyright 2024 Broken Lighthouse Pictures production.